Hi everyone, welcome to day 4 of Learning Redefined. This is Showbie's first online conference, or first conference ever actually. And today is what we are calling Independence Day. And we have a variety of different kind of schools, school leaders, panel sessions that have been kind of running all day today. And this is actually going to be, I believe, quite an exciting and interesting insight into independent schools and how they're using technology and how they are leading innovation as well. For those of you that don't know what Showbie is a hybrid learning platform. It's been used by over 3 million educators around the world. It's primarily focused on giving richer, deeper, more personalized feedback. Showbie has been working alongside educators for almost 10 years, and it also partners with a variety of really useful applications as well. So let's kind of do introductions. I'm gonna kind of welcome our panel, and then we'll go around and give an opportunity to everyone to kind of just introduce themselves and the context of their organizations. So we have Nick Ford with us, Deputy Head of Academics at Bolton School. We've got Matt Warne, who's the Head of Computing and IT at the Royal Grammar School in Worcester. We have Ian Phillips with us, who's the Assistant Head at Haberdashers Ask Boys School. And we also have Harry Earnshaw, who's Head of Computing at Ladybarn. If I've got any of your titles wrong or anything, just kind of feel free to correct me. My name's Abdul Chohan. I'm the VP of Learning at Showbie. And let's make a start. So I'm just going to kind of start off with the top left-hand corner of my screen, which is Nick. Nick, welcome to the panel session. Thank you for making the time. And tell us a little bit about Bolton School and give us some context about what you do there as well.
So Bolton School is, as the name would suggest, is in Bolton in the northwest of England, just north of Manchester. We serve a large catchment area, bringing boys in from multiple bus routes. We are academically selective, and we enjoy some of the best value added at A-level anywhere in the country. So adding in value about 45% onto the average boy at A-level, so significantly above average. Something that we're very proud of, because we believe in trying to reach all learners, and that's very important to us as a school. My job is to be in charge of the academic life of the school, so teaching and learning is my main brief, I suppose, and that's where the iPads and the technology fits. So we're a one-to-one iPad school, an Apple Distinguished School, and I'm an Apple Distinguished Educator as well.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And then moving on to Matt.
Lovely. Thanks, Abdul. So I'm Matt Warne. So I'm Head of Computing and Digital at RGS The Grain. So it's one of 4 schools, part of the RGS family. We have RGS Springfield, one of our prep schools. We have RGS Dodderhill, we've just acquired 2 years ago. So that's under the RGS umbrella, a girls' school, just started taking in boys under the age of year 6. And then obviously under the umbrella of RGS Worcester, the senior school. So a very forward-thinking set of schools, looking to really push things forward, push the boundaries with digital technology. We've been running the digital learning program for approximately 7 to 8 years. Apple Distinguished School over the last 5 or 6 years. Really enjoying the journey at the moment, Abdul. So Apple Distinguished Educator, and just looking to make some traction and continue building on what we've done already.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And Harry.
Yeah, I'm Harry. I started a new role in September as Head of Computing at Ladybarn House School over in Cheadle. We're a large 3-form entry mixed independent school, and my role is to teach computing to years 1 to 6. Ladybarn's a school that has great academic success, and they're very keen to push the innovative and inspiring teaching. Over the last year, we've been fortunate to have been able to deploy a one-to-one iPad scheme across years 1 to 6 with the help of Jigsaw 24, and we kind of set out a roadmap to implement Showbie across the entire school. I think like most schools, our technology and Showbie roadmap was supposed to take about 12 months, but it was naturally accelerated due to COVID, and we achieved everything with about 4 to 6 months actually. Yeah. It tended to be a gradual one, but when lockdown 2 arrived, we decided to jump into Showbie with both feet really, and we haven't looked back. So really excited to see what Showbie brings over the next academic year, really.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Ian.
Hi, Abdul. Yeah, I'm Ian Phillips. I am the Assistant Head and Director of Computing and ICT at the Elstree Haberdashers School. Again, we're academically selected like Nick. And I think we're in the middle of a rationalization of everything we do, which is quite an exciting thing to do. We've got 2 new heads in the boys' school, and next door we have a girls' school. So there's 1,400 in the boys' school, and there's a similar number in the girls' school. And they're both situated on the same site. They share a coach park so that there's a dating agency built in. And we are currently looking at what we do, why we do it, right from the ground up. I mean, we're still always going to be academically selective, but I think it's really important we look at that. It's probably worth mentioning, Abdul, some of the other things I do as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm chair of the Independent Schools Digital Strategy Group, which is a group that's been running for the last 12 years, and we run conferences, and Abdul has spoken at one of our conferences and has been really supportive with one of the publications we had, which was our Developing Digital Guide, which you were at the launch of.
Absolutely, yeah. And fantastic work. And we'll probably hear more about that as we go along. So I suppose the first kind of question I'd kind of like to hear your responses from is very much around this. Technology is a significant investment, whether it's independent schools or state schools and so on. The question that I have is, what are the expectations from that investment in technology? If you spend that kind of investment, infrastructure, device per student, looking at multiple kind of software solutions and all that kind of stuff, that's a significant kind of investment. There's also investment that goes into staff training, development, and so on. What's the return on investment? What are we looking to get? I'm going to avoid kind of starting with Nick all the time, because that just wouldn't be fair. And he's from Bolton, and so am I, so I've got to kind of look after him as well. So I'm going to kind of let me just start off with Harry. Harry, what do you think?
We rolled out the iPad scheme. It was due to start before I began at Ladybarn, actually. And in terms of what we've got back so far is we've got staff who are much happier in terms of their marking and their feedback. It's completely reduced their workload in a sense, and the work that the children are able to produce has been magnificent. I think we didn't, no one could foresee lockdown arriving, but in terms of our timing, it was perfect in a way. So the investment that we've put in has almost paid for itself, that we've had all children have been able to access their learning during the last year.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Matt?
I think when you walk into a school, you want to get that feeling, don't you? That feeling that decisions have been made for the right reasons, that thought has gone behind these decisions. You just haven't invested in technology and just expecting that to make the difference. There's so many stakeholders that we've got to sort of have buy-in on this project as you move sort of forward. So I think for me, it's about, you make an investment, you look at the return, you build on it, but you take the staff team with you, you take the pupils with you. And I think that's so important, the parental body as well. You want to see the difference it does make. And for me, you walk around a school, technology is being used because it can make a difference, and it's not just substituting books or writing, it's actually doing something that you couldn't do without it. And I think that is the significant sort of buy-in when you're going down one of these journeys. And I found sort of back in 2014, when we did have some banks of iPads, they were all booked out, and you knew that there was buy-in from staff. We really had a measured sort of journey on this. And I think if you can get that right and you can get the right people on board, then you're definitely going to make a success of this. You look at COVID-19, we went from one day in school, the next day lockdown, we didn't miss a day of learning. And I think that kind of really highlighted the importance of technology within education and the impact it can have. And I think that's really highlighted.
So Matt, just a quick question for you there. Is that, would you say that that's kind of been the journey for just one school, or is that across the board for the group of schools that you have, and the new school that's come on? You know, how has that worked?
Yeah, great question. I mean, you're always going to have some digital champions across different sort of sectors if you're running sort of multiple schools. And I think that was really good. That was good. A bit of sort of healthy competition where each school was sort of pushing each other on. The RTC, the Regional Training Centre that we run, it was great for community, but it was actually great to get our 3 schools involved. 2 years ago, we acquired another school. And it's been really, really interesting watching that accelerated progress of knowing what we're doing, knowing the mistakes we've made along the actual journey, but now watching this school just grow and flourish within such a short amount of time.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And Nick, your thoughts on this?
So I think if you're setting out to like sort of spend this amount of money on technology, you need to have a plan in the first place. So your expectations of what you expect to get back from that needs to be established before you go out purchasing the technology, and therefore the infrastructure behind it. So I think what you want to be doing is establishing your why. Why are you giving that technology? And for us at Bolton, we were already seeing the world that we're going into. So the universities, many of them are already giving out iPads to students. There are medical schools which are expecting the students to be working on iPads. They're expected to be working digitally anyway. Both Oxford, Cambridge have well-established like virtual learning environments. So we made the decision that actually, by not giving the technology, we were potentially putting them at a disadvantage, because we want them to be ready for that next stage. And then from there, you get all the sort of like, that idea about what does teaching and learning look like, and rationalizing and streamlining processes for teachers, saving them time, the ability to give verbal feedback. We'd all much rather talk to our students, about their work. And it's not always possible within the constraints of the classroom, but the technology frees you from that constraint. So we're seeing better practices in feedback, and that's what's driving the progress forward. So ultimately, what the return we expect is to see our students learning better, our teachers teaching better or smarter, and saving the teacher time, and just streamlining a lot of processes. And I'll go into this, that when you plan this kind of project, you need to have that financial sustainability in mind. How are you going to sustain this project moving forward? So thinking about owning the devices versus leasing, and that's a whole separate topic in itself.
Yeah, I suppose. And maybe the financial element, we can come to it, because there is sometimes this thinking that actually, obviously state schools, will struggle with kind of making this happen, or actually independent schools have done this because you're an independent school. But actually, I don't believe that is necessarily the case, because we get to see a lot of state schools also moving in this direction as well. And I think Nick's right with that, it's the vision that needs to be there, and knowing what is it that you actually want to get out of a project like this. Ian, your thoughts?
Well, you know what I'm going to say. It's about digital intelligence. That's what the outcome at the end. It's also about developing learning that is fit for lifelong learning. Developing learning skills for lifelong learning. And I think most important is the relationships, being able to create foundations. It's the infrastructure, isn't it? It creates the foundations so you can maintain and develop these really important relationships, the tripartite relationships between the school, the teachers, the parents, and the students. That's the fundamental thing, that tripart relationship. I think digital intelligence, though, I mean, it's defined as, and you can look on the DQ site, it's the DQ Institute has done a lot of work on this, but for us, it's been knowing when to use technology and when not to. We have to empower these young people. They're going to move into a world. We need to give them the skills for their life so they can make the most effective decisions. And schools are great places for making mistakes. It's a great place for learning, and learning how to learn from failure. And I think technology is great for that, because we all know it's given us one or two opportunities to fail, and hopefully fail fast so we can learn from those. And I think one of the things that I agree, that's the bell. I agree with Nick. You know, it's been a really good opportunity for us to understand feedback between parents, students, and staff, and we particularly worked on that feedback loop between staff and students. But you know that we did the work with the Education Foundation and EdTech UK and Ty Goddard, and we produced that document, Protecting Learning. And I think that's what we were trying to do through COVID. I think in some cases, some of us will have had opportunities to actually improve learning because of the feedback opportunities on that one-to-one that you can create with this, but also vice versa. You know, there's been negatives, and hopefully what we're looking for is, as we move forward, we can work on what was good and perhaps what wasn't as good.
Okay. I think that's great. And Ian, after this, if you want, through Twitter or something, or social media, it'd be good to kind of share a link to that document as well. I think people would
it was a great document, and you were involved in that as well, weren't you?
Yeah, I think it was good, and it was from a variety of different educators in different contexts and different places. So actually, it was quite powerful putting that together.
It was sort of cross-phase and cross-sector, wasn't it? Which is what we really want in this, because there's great things that are working everywhere, and we don't want to get stuck in our silos. We don't want to get stuck in our schools. We want to be looking at what works, and it's interesting. You know, with some of this diversity stuff now that we need to look at, we also need to look at industry, don't we? And look at what the lessons they've learned and the mistakes they've made, so we can all learn together, I think.
Absolutely. So just kind of, I suppose I'm moving on to the title of the panel, really, about leading innovation. From an independent school perspective, or even this might just be kind of from your perspective in your organization, what are the opportunities to innovate? Where do you feel that, you know, there's been, maybe with technology, it's possible to innovate without technology as well, but what does innovation look like? What kinds of things that you feel that potentially are quite innovative in the way in which, you know, you might be looking at learning, at education, with technology or without technology? What kind of examples can you share? Let's go with Matt.
Okay, so I think over the next few years, in terms of sort of our strategy, because you know everything's got to be planned ahead, isn't it? We're looking at sort of use of AI. We're developing that at the moment across our 4 schools. You know, we're early days, but looking at the impact, that's not going to go away. I think that's going to be a huge area to explore, and it's going to sort of start developing. I think also looking at sort of AR, you know, it's all very well, isn't it, sort of using an iPad and just making something come to life, but what's the significant gains from that in terms of learning? So it's just looking at these different areas really and seeing what do we get from it now, but what you know, how is this technology going to develop? How can we potentially work with some of these companies to make sure that it is fit for purpose? And it's going to really, you know, support learning rather than just being, it can be seen as a distraction, can't it, technology? So it's just got to be something that has got to be impactful and actually add something.
I think you've got to be able to try things out. And I think something that Ian said about, you know, some things might fail, but if there are opportunities that really connect and allow you to try new things, test them out, and if they work, hey, you know, we're going with this. There was a really great talk yesterday. Andrew Moat and Craig Kemp, they did something on AR, and I was kind of expecting that they're just going to pull up a few AR apps and just kind of show you what AR is like, but it wasn't. It was actually the connection. I can't remember the name of the person. It was a professor from Harvard, I think it was. They were kind of talking about the link between cognitive science and how AR experiences can actually support and enhance that. So there was a lot of work on cognitive science and, you know, good learning and what kind of makes the brain tick and what helps us learn. But actually the addition of AR and giving people an experience kind of supports that. And there was kind of some research stuff around that. I'll going to try and find the name of that, the lecturer that was there. That was actually something that might be worthwhile looking at, kind of from the talks that have happened. Nick.
So I'll just follow on what you said. So in terms of learning experiences, you know, the cognitive science. Yeah, and you look at the Willingham book, and he talks about why students don't like school, is that you remember things that you make an emotional connection to, and the more you can make those emotional connections, to what the students are doing, then the more likely they are to remember things. And and the ability for technology to get you to do things in a different way, can help build those connections and therefore build that memory. I think in terms of innovation, I think so at Bolton we've really sort of like pushed creativity as one of those like really vital skills for that are not going to be replaced by AI, that we need those creative approaches. So we have all our students doing the Junior Arts Award in Year 7, so we've done that for the last 3 years, and what we see from there is that actually students are then doing a personal project. The iPad and the technology is giving them the opportunity to express themselves creatively in a way which wouldn't have been possible without it. And I think that's one way that innovation looks. One of our sixth formers, for example, has been doing things in virtual reality, creating a landscape of New York, and then everything, pictures and things dissolving through, creating this like really high-end digital art, building in coding and all sorts of other aspects in there as well. And I think those are sort of like the important things that we need to look at as for innovation, not just for the sake of innovation, it's for how it impacts on learning and how it helps that student develop their passion and their unlock their own creativity. And I'll say, like Matt, we heavily moved down the line of AI as well, and how AI can be used to plug gaps in knowledge and identify gaps that the students don't even know. So we've heavily used those things as well. And I guess it goes back to platforms like Showbie, which give teachers the ability to be able to save time and give them more time to plan, and therefore be able to build learning experiences that are innovative.
Yeah, I think that's kind of quite key, really. It's about, I suppose, in some ways, it's about measurements as well, right? If we're kind of quantifying, the impact of the innovation that you're trialing, or whether it's quantitative data or qualitative data, that then allows leadership teams to make informed decisions about next steps. But I think there is definitely a place to try new things out. And I think, it's about kind of making that happen. I remember many years ago, kind of starting the iPod Touch project. That was kind of like, I really didn't kind of expect to see what we saw, but at the same time, there was a lot of criticism, right? And there was a lot of kind of praise as well. Hey, this is something new and so on. So there has to be that kind of, I suppose, taking a bit of a jump and seeing where this is going to take us. And you know what, if it doesn't really make a difference or we don't see anything, then that's fine. That's kind of learning as well. I just mentioned earlier on about the professor. He's actually from Stanford, and his name is Andrew D. Huberman. And he runs something called, he's a professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology. And he's done he's having some pretty interesting conversations around AR and the impact of that on education and cognitive science and so on. And his Twitter handle is at Huberman Lab, HUBERMANLAB. Definitely worthwhile looking at. There's some really, really interesting things that he's talking about in education. I think it's this kind of stuff that really can then begins to push that innovation piece, thinking about what the possibilities are and so on. Harry, over to you.
Yeah, so similar to Nick and Matt, really, we've been looking at the use of AR, how that can be used in a really positive way. The way the innovation looks in our school, I suppose, we've had a lot of collaboration recently. Our specialist lessons, they're 3-form entry, so we have 66 children across a year group. Only one teacher is allowed in one of the classrooms at once, so there's 2 other teachers kind of facilitating the lesson. So it sounds like an absolute nightmare, but it's been fantastic, and some of the work that we've produced through that setup has been magnificent. At the moment, we're doing kind of a stop motion animation project, and the children have been able to create and collaborate together using Showbie to share their work, to put it together. And it really has shown how innovative the children can be, and also in terms of the staff, the way they can set their lessons as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think the animation aspect is kind of quite powerful. It always astounds me when I think about animation, like where it used to be even 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and what the possibilities are with it right now. It's so easy to kind of put together. But then I think it's opportunities like that that then can link to kind of modeling, students presenting their kind of learning in different ways. And I think it creates the room to have assessment with a lot of creativity built into it. Whereas, yes, we've talked about learning and we've talked about how teachers use creativity to kind of share things with students. But I think there's a big opportunity for students to kind of share their creativity in the way in which they kind of share their learning and their understanding. Ian, your thoughts?
This is, it's interesting. It's all got to come back to creativity. I mean, Ian Yorston came to my school. We were doing some work together and he popped in and he gave a talk to the school, basically, don't be average. Because if you're average, there's a machine that can do your job, right? Whereas if you're not average or you're creative or you're an innovator, then obviously. But I think there's a fundamental step first before innovation. And I'll come back to some of the innovation in a second. There's got to be some standardization. You've got to create a standardized platform from which you can train and build confidence and competence in the use of the infrastructure, so you can communicate, you can access resources. That's got to be so simple and standard so that from that, you can build the platform for innovation. You know, we did the growth headset report on virtual reality. I think that was 2017 now. And what I've been working on since that, I've got a group of boys, I call them my VR society. And basically they take the apps, they check them out then, and then they go and badger teachers and say, hey, miss, we should really use this in the classroom. I mean, and looking at that, I'm also really excited about what Engage are doing in working with Victory VR, because I think the potential there of having individuals in training sessions, having people from anywhere, you know Steve Banbury, obviously, because that's
very well,
and obviously I've done a few training sessions with Steve, and also I've been in his lectures where you have to go and sit on the couch and talk to all the people in the audience. I mean, it's just a crazy thing, isn't it? But I think I remember meeting you for the first time at Olympia. It was a bet. And you were talking about your iPod project, right? And you had a bunch of kids in the room with you who were actually telling people what they thought. And it's a model that obviously I've stolen as well, because it's the most powerful thing. And I think innovation without students, everything that I've done here that's been innovative, I've got a small gang of boys to say, look, am I barking up the right tree here? Is this going to fly? And they've trialed it, they've made sure it's going to work. And then when I roll it out to the students, I've got so much more confidence then to do, especially if you're doing a big day for year 7 or something like that. So innovation, I think there's a number of things on the horizon, but whatever it is, I'm going to work with the boys first, make sure it's going to fly. And I think that would be my advice to anyone wanting to innovate. There's just so many opportunities. Just make sure it's going to work. And I suppose one of the things for me at the moment is, I think for the first time, we're starting to get objective about the great things that are going on. I mean, I don't know if you've read the new book by Guy Claxton. It's only out a couple of weeks now, but in that he's looking at some of the old direct instruction stuff, but he's also looking at some of the progressive things. And I think we're getting some objective. We're not getting tribal about this and saying this is the way to do it or that's the way to do it. We're saying, hey, there's a lot of really good stuff here. And I think with all the sharing, all the partnerships we've got a great opportunity to really learn from each other.
Absolutely. I think it's kind of interesting. I mean, I think we were joking about this just before we kind of joined on, but you know, me kind of living on a plane and airport most of the time, but you know, during lockdown, kind of being confined to my house and kind of working from here and connecting with people. But just before lockdown, the year before, I was doing a project in India. And I was in Kolkata, and I was at a school called Newtown College. And, it's not an independent school. It's not like a it is a fee paying school, but it's kind of like for the average Indian working family. And one of the things that I kind of saw there was they had this whole concept of, and I thought this was really innovative. They had this concept where students were allowed to kind of follow whatever passion, whatever kind of interests that they had. And they actually had a slot in the school week where they were allowed to kind of pursue their passions. And the idea came from some of the supporters of the school that work for Google, and like they have their pet projects that they work on and so on. And sometimes nothing comes of them, and sometimes they kind of take off. So they kind of brought that concept back into the school. So incredibly academic. However, for this particular aspect, the school gave freedom to the students to go and explore. And what was really interesting was the question that I had was, well, there was a bunch of students that were really into coding and programming and so on. I asked the principal, like, how many teachers do you have that are experts in coding that can support the children and so on? And the answer that he gave me was really interesting. He said, we don't have any teacher here that can code. But what we've done is that where there's an interest and we don't have the expertise for, we've gone out to industry and we've asked them to support us. And even before lockdown, they were using things like Zoom, FaceTime, Google Meet, whatever they could to kind of get these people in and help the students to kind of resolve any areas where they might have a cognitive block. I'm stuck on this app thing, or, I'm stuck on playing this music thing. The teacher would kind of go out, reach out to people, connect them up, and this would happen. And something really fascinating happened on my second trip. I was kind of walking through the corridors. I met one student there, and he was tapping away on his laptop. And when I looked at it, I didn't understand anything. He was coding away. I asked him what he was doing, and he basically said, I'm just updating one of my apps. So I thought, oh, this guy's got kind of apps on the App Store. So let's kind of dig into that. So I thought it might be just kind of like, apps that make funny noises or silly games or something like that. And when I asked him about it, he said to me that it's a cryptocurrency tracker. That's the app that he's made. And he's grade 10 and he's updating it, on iOS, and he's updating it on the Play Store and so on. I then found out after I got back that he had actually won one of the WWDC, the Apple kind of worldwide developer conference thing. He'd won that competition, and he was kind of being relocated to the US. His family were moving out there. He'd won a scholarship at a very young age and so on. And it kind of really made me reflect that how many students or children would we have in our schools where we miss that passion, because of course we are interested in academics and letting that happen, but actually most of the timetable and most of the week is kind of taken up because we have a curriculum.
The pressure. It's the pressure, mate. Can I just come in on this, because there's something that I've just done that I think might be useful. So we've formed a computing society, because I was talking to my A-level boys, and I've got some really high-flying A-level boys. They're basically, look, they're on A stars at the moment, okay? And they said, but the work takes out the fun and the wonder and the curiosity, because you just have to do the work. So we formed this computing society right at the beginning of the year, where it was all about wonder, right? And basically doing anything you want. We've now got 200 kids who've signed up for this.
Wow.
Because that's the fundamental. It's not about, there's no grades. There's a course you can do in anything. If you want to do a course with something, you can find somebody to help you with it. And we've created a channel for each one, and so everything's recorded and they can go back to it. And it's crazy that when you go back to that magic, like for me and you, there's the things we do is because we're passionate about them, and trying to be able to give kids that opportunity. We had this kid in 2007 when I joined. this kid was just a great program. And I said, where do you get it from? He said, I don't know. I said, what do you do? He said, just go back to the little ones, start with the little ones and just start inspiring them. And we've been doing that. And what a difference it makes. It's everyone has got that thing inside them that you could switch on if you find the right button. If you find the right talk, the right person, the right book, there's something in everybody. And that's what our responsibility is. Yes, we've got to get them good grades, but we need to turn them on and they find that magic for themselves, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely true. Anybody else want to kind of comment on that area, Nick?
So I think we have similar experience to Ian, really. Sort of, we create the space in our curriculum to enable sort of your boys just to find what their passions are and what their interests are. And they say we have 87% of our year 8 and 9 have achieved the Bronze Arts Award. 100% have completed the personal projects, but 87% have gone on to pursue it further. Like the example you gave of that that year 10 developing. So we had a boy who started with the sort of fundamentals of Swift, and then when he got to GCSE, realised that actually when he was doing past papers and revising, he was a good studious sort of boy, but he couldn't find the mark schemes very easily to sort of to check his work as he was revising. So he built an app to scan the barcode and just pull up the mark schemes. And he just did it, and he put it on the App Store for people just for his year group, just to while they were revising. And then took it off because realising that people might use that for sort of other reasons. But he just did it, and no one asked him to do it. No one knew he was going to do it. He just did it, and and it's having the technology available to students unlocks that sort of potential in boys who can just go off and just do something like that.
Oh, that's quite amazing. Before I kind of move on, because I've got a question for Ian. Harry, Matt, if you want to say anything to that in terms of your context in schools. Yes.
Yeah, I suppose sort of as a computing lead, I completely agree with that. We want to inspire. As a specialist, I want kids. Not every child I teach is going to be a programmer. I get that. The skills that come from the subjects, I really want them to permeate throughout the curriculum. Failure, we start lessons and I say, well, I want you to fail at this. I'm not going to help you straight away. I want you to develop those skills, to refine your practice. And we started to really sort of flip the classroom and get pupils to really take that independence in their learning, where the way we sort of run classrooms, we can get 30 screens on the board. We get the kids at the front teaching each other. And I think that's really, really powerful. On the side of that, we have a really powerful digital leader scheme where we actually get the kids, they'll work with the teachers. We've had the children, some of them have become Apple teachers before the teachers and have been teaching the teachers to become Apple teachers. So what you get with that is a culture change across your staff team, a culture change with your pupils to take risks, to try different things, to experience them. We launched our Girls Can Code as well, where we had a group of females who it probably is a male-dominated sort of area or has been known to be, and we want to change that and shift it. So we got some young girls. Again, technology has actually enabled this to happen. Lunchtime's on a Friday. It's probably about the 4th coding club we run in a week at just this prep school. But the girls will write a little curriculum together. They'll map out, 6 weeks. They'll do Kahoots. They'll do little Socrative challenges, and they'll lead. They'll have 30 to 40 year 3 and 4 pupils, females, all in this computing suite, and they'll lead the whole session over a lunchtime. And it's happened obviously before COVID. We're trying to get back on that sort of project, but as Ian said, it's just about inspiring those kids to find their niche. And from a computing terms, I think we're sort of trying to give them those opportunities to really flourish.
Wonderful. That's brilliant, Matt. Thank you very much for sharing that. Harry, anything you want to add to that?
I think most of it's been covered there, really. Yeah, I mean, also as a computing lead, we're also very keen to build that resilience and to emphasise to the children that getting things wrong is so important, and they need to embrace those and learn from them. Really, in terms of the finding time within the curriculum to pursue those passions and the things the children want to do. I ran a code club, and the first 4 kind of code club sessions were very really structured. I was telling the children what I wanted to do, And then towards the end, the children were saying, can I just explore this? Can I do that? Can they do the other? And the final 2 sessions were much more beneficial than the initial 4, to be honest. So giving the children those chances to explore and to create themselves was absolutely phenomenal.
I think creativity is kind of quite key, and I think it's easy to kind of miss it out. I did a session this morning. I've had a really long day today. I started at 5:30. I was doing this kind of CPD for an international school in the UAE, and the actual topic and the work that we did was actually around creativity and assessment. How can you assess and create an outline for assessment using creativity? And there was a lot of things and opportunities that we could talk about, but one thing that all of you are kind of really talking about here is creating a culture within an organization that allows for growth, that allows for creativity, because that culture, it's the culture that kind of needs to be created for this to happen. It's not always done by one person or, you know, just a policy on something. I think once you've got a culture of this happening, that's when you begin to kind of feel it within the school, you feel it within the environment, you hear it from the students, which is kind of really when you know that it's really kind of embedded in the organization. Okay, so just kind of, Ian, I had a question for you, yeah, because when I first contacted you about kind of joining us on this panel, you mentioned something called the bimodal concept.
I did.
I haven't got a clue what that is, yeah. So I'm going to give you the floor. Tell us about that. What is that? What is it?
Okay, and it sort of goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Okay, that unless you've got a platform for consistency and reliability, you can't really innovate. Okay, so what the bimodal would be is like if you had an IT crew at work, okay, whether it's a mat or whether it's a school, if they're doing both, if they're doing the maintenance stuff, making sure everything works, and they're doing the innovative stuff at the same time, things get mixed up, things stop working. And, you know, and you can't have that. So what bimodal is, where you have a specific team that deals with innovative projects. And so that team would go out, spec out the project while you've got the guys making sure this works every single day, always, right? All the updates are done, whatever. Now you could outsource either of these, because you could have outsourced innovation or you could have outsourced maintenance, couldn't you? Day to day, making sure it works. But the innovation then, what you would do is you would look at speccing it out, you'd looking at the trial, you'd look at the pilot, you'd look at making sure then the pilot could then become mainstream. And then that goes back in to the maintenance system.
Okay.
So it's this idea of approaching innovation as a separate thing by a separate team, even if it's the same guys who put a different hat on and say, today I'm on the innovation team and I'm not touching anything to do with maintenance. It's got to be separate.
You're kind of talking like, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, like almost like a research and development kind of team, right? That is able to trial things out and so on. That's kind of quite an interesting idea. Is that something that other schools have tried or looked at?
Yeah, I think, you know, like I meet with a lot of directors of IT. And, you know, and obviously with our ISC Digital, you know, we talk to a lot of these people because I think for the last 10 years, we've been focused on infrastructure because that's what we need to get right in digital strategy. And in sorting that out, we've obviously had to look at how we could maintain consistency, reliability, but at the same time, innovate and try stuff out. So yes, there's other people who've done stuff like that. I've just put a definition for it, a better one than I just said, in the chat, and there's a Gartner article on this, a piece which is really good, and I'll just put the link to that in there as well, because that was my go-to when we were talking about it at school and using that as a mechanism for moving forward.
Okay, I've just shared that to panelists and attendees as well, so people can have a
exactly. Thanks.
Brilliant. So just kind of moving on, conscious of time and everything as well. I've just done that thing where I've looked at my phone and we've only got 15 minutes left. But,
Wow.
so one other thing that would be kind of great to hear from you is that obviously, you know, as independent schools, how are you kind of connecting with the state sector? You know, how does that kind of support work? Is it always one way? Is it always, you know, the fact that independent schools are supporting state schools? Is there an opportunity for state schools to support independent schools as well? I mean, the whole research and development idea is kind of quite interesting because, you know, there's this potential for that to happen across multiple organizations, yeah, and everyone to kind of benefit from that. So I'm kind of looking at collaboration and I'm looking at support and how does that work within your organizations? Let's start off with, go on, Nick, I'll fire it over to you.
So I suppose I do a lot of like partnership work with the schools in our area. We're part of the same teaching and learning hubs, and sort of the same sort of Bolton Learning Partnership. So we all work together. We've recently been sort of working with the University of Bolton as well, looking at sort of like research and development and teacher development. So the idea being that so perhaps we might lead on use of technology in education because we've got expertise in that, where some other people might lead on other areas. And that's a state school partnership with private schools. So we would go into them and learn how to do effective questioning, for example, and they might come in to learn about how to do effective IT. So those sort of systems are in place, and it's very much a two-way partnership. It's not us telling them how to do it, and we all learn from each other. I also, I'm the chair of governors at ESSA, so sort of work very closely with them as a local school as well. And I just give up a lot of my time to help people. So people ask me questions all the time, and they'll get messages on Twitter, or people will see things that we've done, and then they come in to visit us, and I'll partner and work with people and help them as much as I can, because I'm a nice, helpful guy, I guess.
You are. And if you need to know about spiders or insects, Nick's your man. That's a special interest thing there that Nick has. I always, I think a couple of times I've sent you some images. Nick, what the heck is this? And you've come back with some Latin name that I have no idea about, and so on. But actually, yeah, I mean, Bolton School's been doing some pretty amazing work. Obviously, being a Boltonian myself, and of course, when I was at ESA as well, we did some pretty interesting projects together as well, and I think that partnership is kind of was very much valued as well. Harry.
Yeah. So before COVID hit, Ladybarn started a relationship with a state school over in Earnshaw, and at the very start of the journey, we kind of put our heads together. And we decided what we would like from them and what they would like from us. So to start with, it was there was gaps in the state school's language teaching. So we had 3 specialist language teachers, which we were able to kind of deploy to their state school and have a languages day. In return of that, they were very proud of the work that their teaching assistants did at that school. So we sent our teaching assistants across to their school, where they showed them how they worked effectively and the best practice. And since then, Ladybarn have actually got the best practice with teaching assistants award. So it has been a really nice symbiotic relationship between the two. Then COVID hit, and kind of visits between the two schools obviously stopped, but really looking forward to working with them again in the future, especially with technology. I mean, we're in a fortunate position where we've got drones and robotics, which I'm chomping at the bit to take over to them, really.
Wonderful. That's really kind of good to hear, and I think those kinds of synergies are very, very powerful. And obviously they obviously seem to be kind of working both ways. Matt.
Yeah, I mean, fairly similar. We run quite a few really quite cool projects. We make some links with some great local schools. I'm running a big, I'm sure Harry will be interested in this, a big Sphero event in June for the local school. We'll turn the AstroTurf into a massive 18-hole golf course. And it's great, things like that, because you bring a community together, don't you? Sort of linked to that, we do a lot of work with CAS, computing at schools. That's not an independent thing. That is a network of people just inspired by computing. So we run the CAS hub with the community from here. And it's not just about us giving, it's about actually getting people, giving them a stage, building a community. We often get about 30 to 40 schools in the room once a term, or we were before COVID. We've obviously moved online. But again, we get to learn from them. They get to learn from what we're doing. And I think that is a really, really, it's an important partnership. But when we do have opportunities, when, for example, we've replaced technology or we've got some kit that we're not utilising, we'll try and get it out into local schools. And with that, we'll give our teachers the opportunity to actually go out and go and team teach with teachers. It just builds skills, it builds experience. So those partnerships are absolutely crucial. I mentioned the RTC; it's a similar sort of scheme, isn't it? You share ideas, you share best practice.
Yeah, wonderful, great stuff. And finally, Ian.
Well, I think partnerships is the greatest thing that came out of COVID, really, wasn't it? I mean, it's a disaster, but there's so many positive relationships, not just, what we've done with our local schools, and we're making that increasingly diverse and inviting new partnerships. We've just created a partnerships post between the two schools for looking at not just working in the local community, but looking at where we can create these symbiotic relationships, isn't it? Where we can make a difference and other people can then, it's that cross-fertilization. We've got people going out and teaching in schools. We've got a relationship with a school in Tottenham. We've got a variety of things. But I think just to look up to the bigger national level and the international level, and that's something obviously you've been involved in, some of the stuff that's happened that's helped us to realize the things that are going on for us and how we need to work together in this country, but how we need to work together with people in other countries to solve these wicked problems. Because when there's a wicked problem, something that goes outside of what we can do, we're not going to solve it by being on our own. We're not going to solve it either in our own school or in our own country. We've got to have to step out and look for different perspectives on that. And I think that's been one of the greatest things. And one of the nice things that I've been able to do in the last few years, I'm an Intel visionary, and there's about 40 of us across the world, and we meet together. We've got a WhatsApp group that and there was 6 of us met in an international webinar where we were able to exchange stories. It was with a friend of mine, Shida Patel, Shida Rider in India. She organized it. And the stories, there was no difference between the challenges we're all experiencing. And in all cases, it was the relationship and the communication that trumped. And I think that's the value of partnership. It doesn't matter on what level and with who, we need to just reach out when we got a problem to solve.
And I think one of the potential positives of the whole lockdown COVID saga has been the fact that people are very happy to connect internationally as well. This kind of a setup with Zoom and people joining in and so on, whatever the mode of connection might be, has just kind of made the world a lot more transparent. I mean, it was a bit of a shock to me, during the first lockdown. I mean, I was traveling every other week here, there, everywhere, and so on. But I think in the first 4 days of the webinars that I was hosting from my home, I've met more people from more countries than I had done over the last 4 or 5 years, kind of traveling every other month. I met people from all over the world. And it was really fascinating and quite humbling to hear the fact that they were educators, they wanted the best for their children, they wanted to know the best way of doing something, the fact that they could do, and some of them I then ended up connecting with through WhatsApp and so on, and we're still kind of having conversations. And I think that for me has been hugely powerful. I mean, South America, I've never really been there. I've not had kind of much collaboration there, but since COVID, the number of schools that reached out from Ecuador and Mexico and Argentina and so on, it was kind of quite astounding, to be able to then speak to people and see what it is that they're trying to do. And I think that educators around the world, no matter what kind of school or educational organization you came from, in many ways are kind of unsung heroes of this, because they made learning happen and they made sure that the kids that were in their charge, in their schools, head teachers, senior leaders, the fact that their kids continued to learn. And I think, to be honest with you, I don't think that there's a real recognition of that. I think within the education community there is, but you know, I can give you stories of how I got contacted by a head teacher in Kenya. She ended up on one of my webinars. So what happened to me was, before this VP learning role, the CEO of Showbie reached out to me and said, Abdul, you know, everything's under lockdown. You're not going to be traveling anymore. Do some webinars for us. We don't have an educator on the team, and we want to kind of, you know, we want you to work with schools that are contacting us. And we're seeing 9-10 times the traffic and so on. So I started to do webinars. We were doing 6 webinars a day. 400 to 500 people on each webinar. I mean, it was like almost impossible to keep track of the list and so on. But there was, I always remember this one teacher that contacted me from Kenya, some rural part of Kenya. And she was like, I've only got 24 hours to get something up and running. I've made sure all the children have got a mobile phone, the families or parents have it. What can I do? And we were I was talking her through kind of setting up the free version of Showbie on her phone and so on. But it was above and beyond, you know, the call of duty in many ways. It was outside her time. It was all to do with, you know, her own family and so on. But I just kind of saw that streak happening in education globally. So I think that, you know, the partnership element, the ability to innovate, I think to kind of see new opportunities where possibly, you know, we might not have looked in the past, are really kind of powerful things that I think that that the educators and education kind of need to continue. So look, guys, we're kind of almost here at time. I don't know if you want to say last few words as we kind of exit the session. And feel free to kind of, I don't know, share best practice or kind of give potentially, so within this session as well, there will be people internationally that are kind of joining this. I know at the last count, there was over 2,700 people registered for the conference. So this video will go out to people to kind of thinking more broadly. What advice, tips would you give in terms of, you know, innovation, technology, you know, whatever advice you want to give to educators? I'm going to give you like kind of 30 seconds, quickly kind of go around and, you know, tell us, give us some pearls of wisdom. Yeah, I'm going to start off with Ian because I know he has loads.
I just think keep talking. I mean, these conversations are just great. Keep talking, keep sharing, and particularly talk to your students. Find out where the magic happens for them. I think one of the things, you know, you talked about quite a lot then, is clear that teachers stepped up during lockdown everywhere, you know, and they were the heroes. And whether they're unsung or sung, it doesn't really matter because they're going to do it anyway. But I think one group of people who appreciated teachers were parents. And I think this might have actually affected that, you know, I mentioned the tripart relationship at the beginning. It might have affected that relationship slightly, and that might help the relationship going forward, because perhaps if teachers are more appreciated by parents, that could bring that value to the relationship. And I think it is a fundamental thing. But no, just keep talking and keep sharing.
Thank you. Thanks, Ian. Matt.
I think one small bit of advice, one nugget I'd share is if you've had some good opportunities, you've had some experiences that have enhanced you as a person in teaching and learning, invest in someone else, find someone else in your school, try and give them that stage, that platform to actually share what they can do. You know, invest in your staff team and you'll start to see results. And that's how you start to plant the seeds, aren't you, of a change of culture within a school.
Thank you very much. And Nick.
I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. Start with your why and have a relentless focus on why it is that you're doing what you're doing, and you know, and from there train your staff. And you're better off having your staff good at using 4 or 5 applications of technology in school than like managing 30 odd different ones. Yeah, so start small, invest in your teacher training, and then invest a little bit more in teacher training, because you know, without your teachers, nothing will be driving it forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much. Thanks, Nick. And Harry? Don't know if Harry's still there. Or if he's had to leave. Okay. Well, look, just kind of a huge thank you to everyone that's on the panel. Thank you for kind of making time to be here. I think, again, you know, it's just that investment that teachers make. I know for many of you, it'll be beyond kind of school hours and so on as well. But I'm 100% sure that, you know, people that have been tuning into this will have a lot of takeaways. I know for a lot of state schools, it's potentially a good insight to kind of see that there's great partnerships that are going on, potentially give them the opportunity to reach out to their local independent schools as well, to strike up partnerships and work with them as well. But thank you very much for joining with us. And for those people that are kind of tuning in right now, I'm just going to mention that there is tonight at 8:15, there is an EdTech chat on Twitter. So absolutely, please feel free.
Great.
Kind of join us there, and the person that you need to follow for that chat is Matt Pullen. And his Twitter handle is at Matt 6453. Yeah, I have no idea what that number stands for. I'm sure Matt can tell you. But you know, feel free to kind of join us and then share your kind of thoughts and opinions as well. That will be open for everyone to kind of speak to. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Abdul.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thanks, Ian.
Well done. It's a real pleasure, man.
Okay.
Thanks.
Matt.
Bye.